Okay, my name is Moser, and I'll be talking about how to set up and run OpenVMS x86 on Proxmox KVM. But before I go into any details here, I want to explain or talk a little bit the why and what. So obviously there are many hypervisors around, and as you heard also there are many clouds around. And what you've heard yesterday, especially talked about the clouds. VSI is working very closely with Oracle. And so also on the hypervisor side, the official party line of VSI is that we support Oracle KVM and ESXi VMware. These are basically the two hypervisors which we use and support and do the major work on, especially now with where fiber channel passthrough is coming into play, etc. Originally, when we started, the port everybody was using like VirtualBox on the laptop, etc., to develop, and it's still widely used inside the company. And but it's not the first time where I step off the official portal party line. But I was involved that last fall in September, somebody tried to boot or use a Proxmox, the system hang. Doing boot, never got it up, and that's how I got basically involved. And then I found out that it really helped me because I'm basically living in Finland, but working on a system or shared system, KVM or ESXi, which are 5,000 miles away in the lab in the US. It's not always very efficient. And the good point here, it's also that this runs basically on very, very small hardware as well as large hardware. So as you'll see back home, I actually install it and run it beside my desk on a 10-year-old Dell laptop, a 10-year-old HP laptop, which is not anymore capable to run Windows. It would be too slow, etc. But it's still very, very feasible to put Proxmox on it and KVM and VMS. And Proxmox is also a European company, so I guess European customers might be more inclined or to use it, probably more well known here in Europe than it is in the US. But if you have any questions, you can please just shout or interrupt me as we go along. So the idea, what I'm going through the slide, hopefully there are a lot of technical steps and how to set up that basically you can go back home and use instead of going through all the manuals and the links which are available to get it up and then to kind of run VMS, OpenVMS on it. Because obviously, I mean, it's been used for any kind of people run Linux on top of it, Windows on top of it, but for a very small percentage, it's going to run VMS on top of it. So there are a few tidbits you need to know. But like I said, for me, it's very good because when I was developing now on some KVM specific options, VirtualBox wasn't really helping anymore, or I needed, for example, let's say some word die or the random number generator device is not available in VirtualBox, etc. So this helped me, especially being much more effective in developing things. And so there's a lot I'm not going through. I provide a few pointers, a few links on how to get started. And basically the idea is you download it, you put it on a CD, DVD, or a USB stick, you boot from it, and it wipes everything out what you have on your laptop or Reliant or whatever, because it really takes the system over. There's no half and half, whatever. So whatever you have there is basically wiped out. And a few things you need to know. I mean, there are pointers how to get the kit. You burn, I mean, basically an ISO image and have to boot from it. So on my old laptop, I basically need to go into the BIOS, enable UEFI boot, disable the secure boot, then basically plug it in and let it boot the ISO, and then just say basically install Proxmox, and here we go. And the good thing also, what I think compared to, let's say, for example, ESXi, this one you can do pretty much. It has a very, very good GUI. So basically, in order to get the initial VMS up and installed, you don't need any command line setup or configuration on the hypervisor itself. And this KVM, I'm in the Linux here, it's a Debian Linux, but pretty much standard Linux. So like I said, I mean, you download it, you put it on a USB or CD. On my laptop, I was still one of the fortunate 10-year-old. It still has a CD drive in it. So you boot up, and then you say select install Proxmox VE. And then you provide basically answer a few questions. I mean, what is the target disk, country, time zone, standard installation stuff. And then you hit return, let it go. It does a couple reboots, and at the end, it brings up whatever IP address you have chosen. And then there is the port, like 8006 is normally the standard port for Proxmox. And then you could be able to log in there. And the way I have been using it, so on my system, I basically use back home, I use Chrome to access the Proxmox management interface, which you get to when you use this IP address. And then you have the GUI to create VMs, to add hardware, configure, etc. And I use normally PuTTY with an SSH session to access the Linux. If you really want to do something on the Proxmox KVM. And I use a FileZilla client to move files to and from. For example, move the VMS installation media to the Debian Linux in Proxmox, so it can basically install the VMS. And what I use basically, like I said, I have a laptop like this. I connect it with a network cable. There is also, it supports Wi-Fi, but I need a little more setup. So back home, I have my router on my local network, and I just use a network cable, and it gets quick and easy set up connectivity. And one other thing, also the installation media, the VMS ISO file, which now has to go on to the Proxmox, it has to be in a specific directory so it can be found, like the var lib VC template ISO. There you just put the VMS installation media, and then it can be found during the thing. Yeah.
If you don't have the ISO image, can you actually use the MDK?
I haven't tried that because it is. I'm not sure if that would because the disk here, when we create a disk, it's not. Like, yeah.
You can't use the MDK. It is more complicated, but it is possible.
Yeah, okay. And obviously here, I mean, like there's a lot of things what you can do also. For me, I just basically got VMS running on one VM. I have a kind of a second VM, but I haven't started playing with it like moving or what vMotion type, etc., etc. So there's a lot more to it, what you can do, which is beyond the scope of this. Here, basically, I just want to make sure that you can get it up and running. So once you have that, I mean, you get to the management screen, which I use on my Chrome. And here, for example, you see it's not quite, they changed the font a bit, so everything is a little smaller to read, especially on the back side. But this is now basically the overview of my laptop. So it has only like whatever 16 gigabyte of memory and a couple CPUs, and then what is used, the CPU usage on the box. But in the upper right corner, you click on Create VM, and then you should see the first screen. So it goes through a step, to a series of screens where you have to answer questions, and then it creates the VM. And if you answer wrong or different, you can always correct it afterwards or add more. Let's say network adapter, it takes one, and in the end you can add, modify, edit. So basically in the first one, you get an ID assigned to it. Here it's like 101, and then you pick a name. Next, go to the next one, and then you find basically your ISO installation media like B923 or whatever. So this is an internal base level kit, which I used. And if you have multiple there, you can select what you want. And unless you have it in that directory, it will not find it. I mean, that's the thing where you have to kind of either wade your way through. And it also gives you a lot of options, like for example, that the system, the machine type is basically for VMS, there is the only options are Q35. Actually, in the screenshot above, that's the wrong one, which doesn't work. So it should be Q35 and then the OVMF UEFI. And in terms of SCSI controller, word SCSI, it gives two options, word SCSI or word SCSI single, meaning you have, for each disk, you have a separate controller. So if you have 4 disks, you will have 4 controllers, like DKA, DKB, DKC, DKE. But if you choose word SCSI, you would have DKA 100, 200, 300, 400, something like that. Performance-wise, a separate word SCSI adapter is preferred and better, because then you don't interfere. But also what we found out, if you start configuring a lot of disks on each with its own adapter, you also start overload or putting more load on the hypervisor itself. So if the hypervisor is a pretty small box, then you need to kind of make a compromise. You can have then you would have probably try to find out. I mean, if you can have a compromise of some single disk and some shared disk, where multiple disks on the same controller. But it also provides SATA, but performance-wise, word SCSI is actually where we go. Initially, we had only SATA disks, but performance-wise, word SCSI is much superior than SATA. And that's basically what we see also on the network side. We have now word.io network driver, word.io SCSI, word.io RNG coming, the random number generator, etc., etc. So this is basically the direction we go. And then for a disk, you give a disk size and local storage, and then later on you can add more and more disks of different types. And another thing is also the CPU. They are different than what it should emulate. I mean, what kind of chip, etc. But the only thing which I was able to make work with VMS is basically the host, like the host model. I've been choosing any x86 or different type, but none of them really work with VMS. That either didn't come up or hung or whatever. So, and then you choose also how many CPUs you want. And on the right side, the next is the memory. And initially, I just basically click. And when I tried to boot or install, it wouldn't go anywhere. And it took me a while to figure out that the default is basically 2 GB, and VMS will not even boot with 2 GB. And even get you off the ground. So basically, make sure you have at least 8 GB. I mean, this was on my 16 GB laptop, so I choose half the memory, and that's plenty to get things going. But like I said, I mean, you can install this Proxmox on a ProLiant where you have multiple CPUs and much more memory, and then obviously you can configure. Yeah.
If you install in ProLiant,
I'm pretty sure, but on my laptop, I don't have any fiber channel down, so but that. But it has a lot, I mean, there's a lot of pass-through PCI, pretty much anything what it finds on the device, you can basically pass through to get access to the physical device. If it's on my system, a CD, or if it's whatever, it doesn't necessarily mean that VMS already supports it, but that's in the hope, or my hope is that eventually put that up on some line and see once we have done the work, that also we don't have to do much more to keep it going. But like Camille said, I mean, we have to start somewhere. We cannot support everything. So put the foot down and say, okay, we work on that, we support that. And if it works on something else, we can quote it later on with not much work, then that's a good thing. And like I said, last September, when I started working with it, it was initially some issue with the work with the SCSI driver, but in the end, whatever I fixed there was also needed to be fixed with something else. So right now, in my books, I didn't have to do anything in VMS to make this one work. In addition to like Oracle KVM or ESXi, whatever works there is pretty much out of the box alone. It's just basically testing or qualification issue. But the idea, I'm pretty sure, or that's my hope, that pass-through would also work on that. But right now we haven't installed it on any client or bigger box, because that's what right now what we use for ESXi and for Oracle KVM.
Because you have not to buy anything VMware, but you need to try it for
Yeah. And the other thing here also, I mean, they have basically a subscription. Proxmox, like if you would do it commercially big on big systems and want to have it supported, that you pay some money. But they also have basically the non-subscription, which they support, and that's what I've been using, and it's basically free. So I can use it for development without violating any you say
Licensing.
yeah license issue. Okay, so and then the next thing is network. So we have also, I mean, we have Word.io, we have like the E1000, you can pick either or. You can also later on add more network adapters and do a mix. And then the next one brings up the summary screen, what you have selected, and then you do finish and create the VM. And then you have basically different tabs. So in the upper left corner, when you see data center, and then the next one is CMOS 04. That's basically, if you click on that one, you would get the first screen, which is the overview of the hypervisor. And then comes basically the VM. I have a 100, 101. So the 101 is now the VMS virtual machine. And here we have different tabs. And one is the hardware, where you see now what is configured. And on top, it has like an add button and an edit. You can basically select an item, go to edit. So if you want to add the memory, more memory or CPU, change it. Or if you want to add more disk or more network adapters, you would choose add. And with that, it's easy to modify the configuration.
This is serial port console.
So just for that one is my next slide, because there was none here because nobody was asking for it. So in order for me, I added a serial port. So I could use on the right upper corner console. I use basically the external JS console option. And that will basically open a separate window. And then you have the normal console output that we would be used with another serial console, what we have been doing.
How do you connect to that?
Sorry?
How do you connect to that?
Nothing. I mean, there's no cable, no nothing, because that's just so now if I want to start it, I click normally on the start button to get the VM going. But then it would just start up, and then I click on the console, and it opens basically a console window, which I can show here. Then you see basically a console window, which is a separate window which pops up on your
In Chrome.
so
In Chrome.
in Chrome. I mean, it's, yeah.
So you don't.
So if you kill the Chrome, everything would go away. But it's a separate window which you can have, and you can minimize it, etc.
So you're not able to connect from outside to the console. You have to go into here.
Yes, yeah.
Which is just.
Yeah. And basically, if you would click the other than I think the no VNC, then it opens a window inside this whole. It doesn't do a separate pop-up. But for me, I keep this one so I can easily modify stuff and have the separate console window up. So, like I said, there's nothing you have to do, or you don't need any commands from the command line to get it going. But initially, when I booted it up, it was hanging, and then I Googled. I mean, there have been a lot of people have been trying, and they always said it starts up and then it hangs. And one thing is what you have to do, you have to disable the HPAD. There are different timers. So there's the high precision timer, then we have a rapid timer. I mean, what kind of timer are we going to use? Or the hypervisor might have more than one timer, and then VMS is going to use it for its own internal timing, how it does the hardware clock, etc., etc. And HPAD is not really working here, so you would have to disable that because that would come up as the default here on Proxmox. And the one thing is you could set this QM is basically that's the interface from the console. And the 101 is my ID, and you can set or configure. You see what you have configured. You can change arguments, but in reality, you could also not do anything of this and change the VMS sysgen parameter timer underscore device to 1, which is equivalent that it would be instead of the HPAD timer would use the Galactic timer, and there we have also we have made some changes to make it work.
How do you get to that?
Sorry.
How do you get to the?
That would be then like what I had in the beginning. I said I'm using basically the Chrome to access the management interface. But since this is maybe on Linux, I can just SSH to it. Like here I had when I booted, I chose 192.168.32.70 was the address of my hypervisor Linux, and if I do SSH to that, I get the normal Linux from. I can do whatever.
The default port.
Yeah, default. I mean, with SSH, that would be 21, 22, whatever. But then if you use port 8006, you get the GUI. So like I said, now you can basically query what you have. I mean, you see like if you do qmconf 101, then you would see like what's the BIOS, what's the boot order, what disks are configured. There's two SATA disks, SCSI disk, etc. And like I said, if you did not disable the HPAD, VMS will not come out. And it will basically go pretty far, but I think as soon as you try and send the system to connect to the memory disk, then it hangs. And like I said, it gives two options. Either you do the one time there, set an argument machine HPAD off, or you change the system parameter timer device to 1. That's the same thing. And the QM show command for that would also show how the QEMU would start up on the KVM when it boots. We don't have really to know about that because we do it from the GUI. You don't have to worry about it. So it does. But if you want to have know exactly what's going on here, then that's what you would do. And like I said, so I click on Start and then open up that console window. And you could also go the other way. You click on the console window, make it big, you see the Start button, then you click on Start. And then it starts doing the same thing. It gets our boot manager. It's the same thing. You hit Escape, you stop in the boot manager, you can select which boot device or prompt, etc. So from here on, it's pretty similar to whatever we have on other hypervisors. And like I said, you can now boot to the installation media. And when you boot, you will see a couple messages like there's the boot manager ACPI, no 8-pad clock, using fallback clock sources. So that's, like I said, I mean, we have different, what we use as the clock source for VMS, I mean, for the timing. And
question. This parameter, you have to get it by your conversation boot, or where do you specify this parameter?
so the first time you would then basically, when you are here at the boot manager, I would then boot, let's say boot EKA, whatever, EKB 100, 0,1 is the flags, I get in the sysboot, and I can change it there. That's for the first time because you have nothing running there. And then you would have to set it. That's the same thing when you try to boot the installation media, you would have to change it. And then once you get the VMS configured, then you have to change it again. But if you just disable 8-patch from the VM in total, then you don't have to worry about that.
It's the main trick.
Sorry?
So that's a main trick.
Yeah. Yeah, and then you would go through the installation normal as you would do. Pick your target disk, it runs through everything. And a couple other things in the beginning. I mean, I had a couple of disks defined for, so I had a couple of SATA disks, a couple of study disks, and I wanted to configure on something, but I never saw it in the boot manager, so I wasn't able to boot from it. The thing here, the trick is in the options, there is the boot order field. And you see like SCSI 0, 1, 2, SATA 0, IDE. So any disk you like to boot from, if it's an installation media or if it's a real disk, you have to specify the boot order. Otherwise, it will not show up in the boot manager. I don't really know why if that was ignored, because when the boot manager scans all the devices which are visible, just to identify which are bootable devices. So, I mean, that was a trick. I mean, just put in the boot orders, you would now select the boot order, and then if you modify it again, you can also change the order. I mean, which like with any laptop, do you want to boot by network or the SATA disk or which one first? But for us, it's basically in the boot manager. Once you boot it from one disk, it keeps track of that. If you just do a reboot, it will go to the same disk, unless you stop it again in the boot manager and select a different device. You can also get in the EFI shell, which I don't really have need for. But it's the same way. I mean, once you start the VM, you just hit escape early enough to get into the options menu. Then you can select the boot manager. Then you select the shell option, and then you would get in there the internal shell, and then you would end up in something like that, which people who have been working with VBox is probably very familiar. And then you could do a C to an FS device. You could go to the directory, the EFI and the VMS, and start the boot manager from here if you're really inclined to do so. But I didn't really have a need with any of this. And, but just to show everything is available, it's like the normal other KVM. And like I mentioned, there is basically repositories. You can also update, upgrade, like fixes every now and then. I go periodically upgrade and I check are there any new Debian fixes to the Linux, the operating system, or are there any fixes or updates to Proxmox itself? And you can do all that through the GUI. You don't need to do it from the command prompt. And like I said, I mean, there's the subscription media, and normally there's an annoying invalid subscription error pop-up if you want the non-subscription version, but this long command string will basically, once you executed that, then the pop-up doesn't show up anymore. The other time, when you log in, it tells you, yeah, you don't have a subscription, but that's really what you want. You want it on the non-subscription, but it tells you basically, yeah, you would. So, like I said, in the upper left corner under the data center, not the VMS, VM, if you go one level up, which is basically the summary of the hypervisor, there is a repository, and then you see a list of what's available. And the bottom ones, I mean, they have a tick mark. These are the ones which are enabled. So there's some Debian repository, and then also from Proxmox the no subscription, PV no subscription. And I basically disabled the enterprise and the PV enterprise because these are subscription modules, and then you don't get any errors, because that's really what you want. And you see just one tag up above the repository is the update. And here you will see if you click and there's nothing to do, it will tell you you're up to date. But here it had a list of like current version, previous or new version, and then you would on the top upgrade, and you would open a separate window with a normal Linux window, and it does all the update itself. So you don't really need the console or any of the Linux unless you want to do something specific. And this is also, it will check for any updates. I mean, here, this was still like 8.2.7 Proxmox. If you play in the upper left corner, the version, by now, I think it's probably 8.6 or something. And they also have regular updates to the software itself. And what I also did, because I'm using the system back home to access our internal network, which is behind the firewall. So we are using WireGuard. And I was easily able now to install WireGuard, that system itself, but I need to install now something on the Proxmox, on the hypervisor itself. So I need like the WireGuard tools, OpenResolve, and then I had to get a new key, and then I had to edit the WireGuard config file on the Proxmox host to remove some of the allowed IPs, like in the top one, allowed IPs. There's a list of allowed IPs. I had to make sure that I don't conflict with any IPs I have on my own network. And then basically I restart and did the show, and at the bottom I ping basically internal address, which is in a lab in the US behind a firewall. And now this is from my home in Finland accessing that. So the ping shows that. But in order to do that, I needed basically a second network adapter, because one network adapter I use for my Windows laptop. I could do a PuTTY window to the VMS, post on that one using all the local network I have at home. And then I needed another one to get from the VMS to the internal lab or development system in the US. So these are the commands. The VMBR0 is basically my normal local home network, 192.168.32 is the subnet I'm using there. And the 70 was basically the address of the hypervisor itself. So the second one, the VNet 1, I chose another subnet, 192.168.3. And these are the commands which basically forward that to the device WG0, which is the WireGuard device. And so I have basically, with the IP table forwards for the 192.168.3 subnetwork to the WireGuard device and then out the wire. And also with TCP IP, obviously I had to set up. Now I have two devices on top. You could see beside the local one, the subnet, the 32 subnet and the 3 subnet. And I had to set up for the 3 a gateway. And then I basically, to do that, I set up 2 bridge network adapters on the tab. So like I said, one, I used the PuTTY session so I can work on the system. I work from the laptop with the PuTTY session on the VMS system. And then the second, I get outbound access to internal system where they have access to build VMS or do development, etc. So here's just an example ping and then a telnet, how I got there. Again, in TCP IP, like I said, I mean, here you see the top, the interface, EA0 and EA2, which are here with the addresses. And then here, basically, I told you here in the setup, I had VNet 1 and VMBR0. So these correspond to the adapter here, which I configured. So actually I have 3 network devices on my system. The VMBR0 is my local one, and the VNet 1 is the one for which I use to get to the internal system in the US. And here you see also, I mean, at the bottom, I also configured like a real-time RNG device, which is a random number generator device, which is available. And like this device wouldn't exist on VirtualBox, for example. So this also helped me to do a lot of development on a local system back home. And so
what was the last one doing?
Sorry?
The last one, what was that doing?
That basically, we have now a driver. This is what the coming slide had 4924 in a year. Basically, people who want to have random data. Just any random data. I mean, nowadays you either have a seed unit and it always starts. The first random number might be the same that you get every time, but it is truly random. So you can basically say, okay, I want to read 1,000 bytes. Give me 1,000 random bytes, or give me 10,000 random bytes. This is all this entropy which we come with the ship, and in the future, I mean, as a driver, the device basically, which just provides you with this random bits. So
it has nothing to do with networking.
No, that has nothing to do with networking. No, but that's just like I said, a lot of stuff we don't have on other systems, on other hypervisors.
Exactly.
And in terms for, I don't have a screenshot now for the pass-through. I think it was in the options where you can basically, I can't remember if, I would have to look again. I thought if somebody had like the question on the pass-through, it could also be in the hardware option when you do add, and then I think it tells you, okay, what do you want to add? It gives you option like for example here, I already had now the RNG device. There's no second one, but if I say I want to add something, and then I think it gives you option like, let's say, if you want a PC map, this device is what you have on your system, and that would be the way to configure pass-through. Select the fiber channel device, and then if you have a driver which works, then that should be the way to go. Yeah, that's pretty much what I had talked about just basically how to set it up, how to get it going. So we don't stumble over the same thing. Many people. I mean, there's a lot of if you Google or have problems, there's a lot of good. They have a good documentation how to do things, but many of them are geared to Windows VM or other Linux or other, but very few on VMS how to do things. So that's why I hope that will help people who want to work with that. And especially now, I mean, Camille said we have started offices in Europe in many locations, but many of these locations, they don't have any hardware lab, so they still also use the lab in the US. And I think there's a lot of laptops so cheap for all the hardware lying around that have to be used for instead of just scrapping the hardware and doing development. Not really meant just to do some production, but if you want to test your software and you forget something, that's one option. Any question?
Is there a facility within Proxmox to import a machine's definition and disk images from, say, VirtualBox directly?
I would assume that from what I've got, but I wouldn't now know exactly how, like, let's say I have a config, I put in VirtualBox, I mean, somebody can set up a machine, it gives you everything, you import it, and you have a ready system. I didn't go down that route, but I think that option should exist, so similar to like what you're describing in the cloud. I think you have something, you load it up, boot, and it's ready to go, something like that.
Is there an option to clone?
Yes, and there is, but like I said, I haven't played with any setting up a second one and start moving things, etc. But they have also good capabilities, and there's a lot of options. I mean, it's Proxmox because they have. But yeah, I haven't like also snapshots and stuff like that.
But if you're looking for some help, then KVM help should also be generally.
Yeah, yes. A lot of things they apply like generic KVM.
Yeah.
Some of it is specific then to Proxmox because the other one is Debian and the other one is a different flavor of Linux. But this is in general, I mean, all the commands. I mean, it's normal. You would move with the KVM.
It's possible to move on one server to have VM for VMS and another VM for Linux.
So you could configure now a second VM and choose different operators.
And then they could connect it between.
Sorry?
And there will be possible to communicate between two.
Yes, yeah. I mean, TCP/IP would be the same. If you set up a second VM and choose to install Windows, and then Windows could talk with TCP/IP to VMS. So you set up the second VM with this VMS, and you could cluster that together, and you could cluster it with systems outside the box. So like I said, as long as it's on the same network, or you use them cluster over IP, so it does the same thing as what we do now with ESXi and Oracle KVM. Anything else? Okay, thank you very much.
So were you? I did it a long time ago.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I thought.
Yeah.
You were in Melbourne also?
Also, yeah.
From when?
I was 87 to 90. I was in Melbourne, and I went to Finland.
And we have been there. I was from 85 to 89.
Okay, yeah.
What did you do now in Melbourne?
Oh, I was in the Odyssey at first, and then I did some the group called and we just.
Yeah, same with Heinz. Go.
Oh, Kurt Jensen was working a lot.
Oh, Søren Jensen also?
Yeah.
Okay, I recognize your name. Sorry, you were the one that was asking about the VKD.
Yeah.
So it is possible.
Yeah.
So I don't have it in my knowledge, but I do have it on my laptop. I did very similar exercise for this, but I didn't have an ISO. I had the
Yeah.
the community version.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was going to give you my contact info. I can send that. over
Yeah,
to
if you can.
If it's, and same if you're interested in the conversion from.
Because they suddenly start doing the VMPK instead of the iPhones on the side of the community software. I prefer to have the OSI, but I don't mind to have a free. So should I just?
Yeah. So I'll give you my contact.
Plus, what's your rate?
So